Well, good afternoon to our listening audience. It's my pleasure to have here with me today my good friend and longtime colleague Ken Nobis, who has really been sort of a fixture in the dairy industry in Michigan and someone I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for over 10 years. And we're going to continue our conversations about the impact of research, the real life impact of research conducted at MSU by AgBioResearch on the dairy industry. And we'll be fortunate to get the personal perspective from Ken of the impact that this work has had on his farm and how he personally has helped support some research that's really made a difference for the dairy industry in Michigan. So, Ken, welcome. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, George.
Yeah. So let's start out by maybe you telling us a little bit about your story, your career in the dairy industry, that it kind of set the framework for talking more about how you got involved in supporting, you know, dairy cattle research done by ag bioresearch scientists like Richard Persley.
Well, it goes back a long ways, actually. I think I was destined to become a dairy farmer because when I was 12 years old, a tornado hit our farm and destroyed our two-story 40 cow stanchion barn. I was 12 years old at the time. My dad was in partnership with his two brothers. That was on May 12th of 1956, and that was a busy summer. I had been helping with chores, since I was old enough to go out to the barn, I guess. But that summer, I actually milked all those 40 cows on my own as a 12-year-old.
Wow.
So it was because they were so busy doing other things,
Uh-huh.
rebuilding. That was interesting. But anyway, so the only time I have not been on the dairy farm was the 4 years that I was a student at Western Michigan University and the 2 years in the U.S. Army. When I graduated from high school, I applied to Michigan State and was accepted. But I had this bright idea that I wanted to play some college football,
Mhm.
and I knew I wasn't good enough to walk on at MSU. I walked on at WMD. I ended up with a full ride scholarship. Um, when I got out of that, I graduated in June of 1966, and in August of 1966, I was in basic training. Spent 2 years in the Army. Fortunately, I was at the headquarters of the Army in Europe in Heidelberg, Germany. A very good experience. But I came back to the farm in August of 1968. And like I said, I got my undergraduate degree at MSU or at WMU, but I feel like I got a postgraduate degree out of MSU working with the Extension Service.
Mhm.
Because I started working with them closely right away, and then some great people at MSU over the years: Bill Thomas, Bill Bickert,
Mhm.
Herb Buckles,
Mhm.
Richard, you.
Mhm.
There's a whole list of people that I gained a lot of information from. Our dairy herd grew from the 65 cows when I came back in August 68. And when we actually sold our herd a year ago, at that point we had 1,000 cows.
Mhm.
In the meantime, when I came back, the two brothers my dad was farming with had both left the farm, and Dad ended up with the dairy herd.
Mhm.
At that time, there were 65 cows, and I was, 6 years, I think, before my brother came back to the farm. And we just continued to grow and expand. And I did take a strong interest in the nutrition side and cow comfort. So that's where I worked a lot with Bill Thomas and Bill Bickert. Um, so we've had a long history in the dairy industry. And then in 1992, I was elected to the board at MMPA, and later was elected president of that board in 2007, I believe. And then subsequent to that, I was also treasurer at National Milk Producers, and later on, I was vice chair at National Milk Producers, and was also active on the promotion side of the dairy. So, and all along the way, I kept working with MSU, and I grew a lot over the time frame, and enjoyed every step of that journey. But that's pretty much my background.
Yeah, Ken, that's awesome. I hadn't heard, some of the family aspects of your story and how you got started. Certainly something to be proud of, a long history in many, many areas where you've provided a leadership role and really helped make a contribution to the industry and made a huge contribution to MSU and AgBioResearch and Extension through your involvement in the Michigan Alliance for Animal Agriculture as well, which we'll get to that a little bit later. So what we'd like to really hear about from you is your personal perspective of working with researchers like Richard Pursley, and I do have to give a shout out to the other, some of, great, great contributors to the dairy industry in Michigan, other people that you mentioned as you work through all the folks that you've had the opportunity to work with. Those individuals, we don't want to neglect the contribution they made, but talk a little bit about the work you've done with Richard Pursley. And from your perspective as a dairy farmer, what was the most meaningful impact of Dr. Pursley's research on your operation?
Well, we started working with Richard, I think, almost immediately when he came to MSU. So we have a long history. He impressed me from the beginning by his practical approach to the research that he thought was necessary. I guess to jump to the question that you asked, the most important thing that I saw from that research was we improved conception rates and we improved our efficiency. And as I've learned working with researchers, sometimes it's the things you didn't really think about researching that turned out to be significant improvements. And in the case of the work we did with Richard, the one thing I noticed is that when we started synchronating our estrus cycles, the barns were a lot quieter. You didn't have cows mounting all the time. You didn't have cows bellowing. You had fewer injuries due to that activity. So that was kind of a side benefit. But the efficiency we gained by synchronating our cows, knowing that one day a week we were going to have a bunch of cows to breed, but we weren't out there. We didn't have a person in the barns. What we had done before we were synchronizing is we checked 3 times a day, 20 minutes each time. So that was an hour in each barn. And at the time we had breeding animals in 3 barns. So that was 3 hours a day. And then you had to depend on the person being there, having their eyes wide open and being able to catch the cows because it was before collars and movement. So that was a great improvement. Being able to plan our days I thought it was a very big issue, but then the improved conception was obviously great.
Yeah, I've known Richard for a long time as well. We were colleagues in animal science before I got my start in, research administration. And, one of the things that really made Richard's program so impactful was not just his practical understanding of dairy farming, what it's like to be a dairy farmer, because he was a dairy farmer before he went to graduate school and pursued his second career in research and extension, which he's had an incredible impact, was Richard's commitment to making sure the technology, the advancements, the information that can benefit the industry gets out to people in the industry where it can be used in a positive fashion. And I know he always spoke incredibly positively of the conversations he had with you and how open you were to having him do research on your farm. We've got a brand new dairy facility, which is going to really help us take those research discoveries to the next level. But there are certain types of research that's best done on a real life setting in commercial farms. And I know he was really appreciative of his relationship with you and that partnership. And that helped advance his research and the impact he has had on the dairy industry.
Well, one of his other impacts that people probably don't realize that I got to understand was he was a great recruiter of grad students. And he recruited some really sharp people that then advanced the industry even further because they worked with him.
Yeah, that's so important, Ken. You're right on with that one. We can't overlook it, but we often do, the educational component that goes right along with the research programs. Those people, those graduate students are the boots on the ground on the farm every day. People like Richard and others doing work. While they would love to be on the farm every day, they have other things they have to do. Those are the people that are collecting the data, that are doing the research, helping form that foundation of information that leads to the discoveries that have a practical difference, and also benefiting greatly from being on your farm, working on a commercial farm, and what they learn from you. And those are that's the next generation of people like Richard. That's the next generation of people that are consultants working with the industry. And then sometimes that's the next generation of people that may go back and manage farms and benefit from that type of experience. So the educational piece, the workforce development piece associated with the research mission and the extension mission is really important too. And that practical experience helps set those students up for their own productive careers in the future and being able to make an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So talking a little bit more, and you touched on this a bit, being able to control what goes on in the barn and when cows get bred, often referred to as breeding by appointment rather than breeding by when you happen to catch a cow in estrus. So how did these improvements in conception rates translate into increased efficiency and profitability on your farm?
Well, just because we were getting them bred back, we didn't have those long delays on cows that weren't showing estrus. Just the fact that that person that was spending 3 hours a day, 7 days a week in heat detection now had another job they could do. Or maybe they didn't have to rush as fast to do the other jobs. Efficiency is a big part of it.
Right.
Huge part of it, in my opinion.
Spot on. Huge impact there. And, we know over time, there's data showing that dairy cows, the amount of time that they will show estrus and be responsive to be bred is not very long, shorter and shorter. And before some of the new technologies, that was a huge challenge. So being able to work within your herd and say, okay, we're going to control the time when cows get their first insemination and are first bred on your schedule rather than the cow's schedule, that has huge benefits from an efficiency perspective. Then also reducing non-productive days that cow might be in your herd if it takes 3 or 4 or 5 inseminations to get them pregnant. So really, really transformational discoveries that have had a huge impact.
Yes. Yeah. That was when I came back to the farm, that was one of my big concerns. It may seem kind of funny, but I do remember waking up several times in the middle of the night because I dreamt the cows were all open. So it was something that weighed on my mind. It was something that I knew had to be done and had to be done right, or you fail.
Right. Yeah. And so the great work that Richard has done, the research he's done on your farm, and the impact that's had in terms of discoveries that make a difference and forming the foundation for his extension program as well. We want to make sure we emphasize that. I say on these podcasts all the time, we're not all about research for the sake of research. In fact, that's not our goal. We're here to facilitate research that has real life impact, whether it be short or long term, that can make a difference. And without getting that out to the people in the industry who can use it, what's the point, frankly? So Richard having extension and research appointment has really helped facilitate his impact and has been really critical to success.
Well, and the one thing I appreciated from Richard was that he worked with the veterinarians. The one person we see every week for certain on a dairy farm today is a veterinarian. And I think for many years, the veterinarians were left out of the loop. on too many issues. They're the next most important to the researchers to make sure we move forward, because they are talking with that producer and they can convey the information from researcher to producer in a very efficient manner.
Kind of circling back to the Michigan Alliance for Animal Agriculture, I know it's a program that's near and dear to my heart, as when I first got started in research administration, that was my first project or assignment, to work with partners in the industry, of which you were one of them, and several others, to help provide a framework for this program that's really been transformational. So funding from the Michigan Alliance for Animal Agriculture has been really instrumental to Richard's program and the impact that he's had. And I know you know the history. You were involved from day one. Talk about, from your perspective, why these kind of partnerships are so important from a farmer perspective. And would love to hear your input from your own farm perspective, and maybe also from a broader industry perspective. And then I've got a follow-up question related to that, which I'll kind of throw at you next.
Well, I agree with you 110%. MAAA was definitely transformational. If for no other reason, it brought producer and researcher closer together than they've ever been. Prior to MAAA, I used to hear, when I was at MMPA and working with producers across the state, there was criticism that the research that MSU is doing, I don't think it's practical research that applies to my dairy farm. When we put MAAA together, I mean, this was at a time when research funding was declining from USDA, and we were looking for money. Putting producer and researcher together, put together the group that could go to the state legislature and lobby for research money. Because now we were both on the same page. I mean, when we got that put together and got it operating, I didn't hear the complaints about unfocused dairy research anymore, because with MAAA put together, we did lobby, we did get money from the legislature, but we sat at the table with a researcher, and between the two of us, we decided which was the most important way we needed to spend that money. You know what, I'm not at MMPA anymore, but I've joined with the Farm Journal Foundation. And the Farm Journal Foundation does a lot of lobbying in Washington for research. And I walk into a congressperson's office and I cite that experience in Michigan as a basis for spending more money from the national level on research, because it is being spent very efficiently today. When you've got producer and researcher working together, I think it's a unique situation that improves the outlook for everybody.
Boy, Ken, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, spot on. And many, I would say the foundation of what has made that program successful is it is stakeholder driven. It's focused on the needs of the industry, which the dairy industry and other animal agriculture industries, allied industries, have the opportunity to identify each year. What are the priorities? Where is the need in terms of research or extension programs? Faculty write the proposals. Industries involved in review of those proposals. Then industry sits together at the table with, leadership from MSU, ultimately to decide, and it's industry that decides which are the proposals that get funded. That ensures the work that's being done is focused on what the needs of animal agriculture are on an annual basis. And I would say the track record and the research that's come out of that, the ROI is really pretty strong. So I would say more than just pretty strong, really strong. And it all relates to the partnership, how we work together, the animal agriculture industries with MSU, listen to each other, and how the program was designed with your input and your guidance in terms of what the priorities are. really unique model. And I'm so thrilled to hear that you do use that nationally. And I do got to give you a shout out as well. You're a tremendous advocate for agricultural research within the state of Michigan and nationally. And I appreciate the work you're doing with the Farm Journal Foundation as well. We need more and more people that are willing to talk about the real life impact of research and the importance of funding for research, because now more than ever that funding is in jeopardy at a time when agriculture, I would argue, needs it more than ever. So yeah, great example.
Well, I appreciate your comments. It's easy for me to do, and I'm very proud of the state of Michigan because we've been a leader in dairy production for many years. I think now we got the model for dairy research also.
So I don't want to go negative, but just for the sake of illustrating the importance of agricultural research funding and specifically MAAA, what would be lost if funding for MAAA was no longer provided by the state of Michigan?
Well, it would definitely be a loss. I mean, we can't, this country led the world in ag research for many, many years. And today, China's ahead of us, the EU's ahead of us. I don't think there's much difference between us and Brazil, to be honest with you right now. We will not continue to lead the world in food production if we don't do the research. Maybe we don't have to increase it dramatically, but we can't keep going downhill. We'll go backwards. It's it doesn't just happen. If you don't do the research, you're not going to get new results.
Right.
I don't know. To me, I just have to put it in plain language. If it went away, I wouldn't happen overnight, but Michigan State would not continue to be the leader in dairy research that it is today.
Yeah, well put. I think the take-home message from my perspective is our animal agriculture industries in the state, including dairy, would suffer. And this is a time now more than ever where agriculture needs the support of our land grant institutions through research, through innovation, and extension. So it would be the worst time possible to disinvest. There's never a good time, but those new discoveries, there's no new technologies, those new programs that translate into efficiencies, increase profitability for agriculture, and the close linkage of agriculture to rural prosperity. The stakes are higher now than ever before. So I don't even like to think about it, but we have to ask that question, and we have to be willing to put on the table what the risk is and what would happen if that critical support for agricultural research was no longer available.
Well, I don't think a lot of people don't realize the economic impact of agriculture on the state's economy. It's huge. And, it's not just feeding people, it's the economic side of it also.
Right. You're preaching the converted on that one, Ken. Over $125 billion a year in economic impact from agriculture. I think you make a good case during the Great Recession that agriculture saved the state's economy, because it was really the foundation at a time when manufacturing was really, really, really hurting. And so much potential for agriculture to grow in the state of Michigan in an environmentally sustainable fashion. And research and extension are the key to that potential, and really ensuring, we're a food secure state and we're a food secure country. That's the other scary part too. You start thinking about what are the implications of this country becomes more and more dependent on getting food from other countries in the face of, what's going on in the world, whether we're talking about the impact of the pandemic or the geopolitical issues, et cetera. I think it's important we continue to be a country that feeds ourselves by ourselves, and investment in research is really critical to being able to accomplish that goal. So now let's talk about something that's a more recent development that we're really excited about: the state's investment in the new dairy facility on campus and how we think that could really be impactful for agriculture and the dairy industry in Michigan, not just from a research perspective, but also workforce and outreach. Love to hear your perspective on this investment and what we think the future might hold.
Well, it was a long time coming,
Yeah.
but very, very necessary. We just didn't have enough animals in the old facility, and it was antiquated.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be brought up to date, but we also needed more animals there. I think if I remember correctly, there were a lot more requests for research
Mm-hmm.
prior to
Mm-hmm.
building it than what
Mm-hmm.
MSU could possibly take care of. I hear some people kind of look down their nose at research or at universities doing research because they think that, and they're right, private industry does more research than what it used to do. But I'm betting that a lot of that research that MSU could not accommodate was probably follow-up research that private industry had done and needed the verification from a university before it was meant anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very important. And there aren't as many research facilities, dairy research facilities around the country as what there used to be. And there will be fewer down the road.
Right.
So it's important to have a dynamic dairy research university stay up to date and expand with the number of animals they needed and also with the processes of handling those cows that you didn't have before. It's really something to be quite proud of for the state of Michigan. And I look forward to the quality research that's going to come out of it.
Right. Right there with you, Ken. I can tell you there's tremendous enthusiasm and excitement surrounding that, investment in new infrastructure that will have a positive impact on the research we do to meet the needs of the dairy industry now and in the future. Training the workforce of the future in a modern, state-of-the-art facility with all the latest technology and as an outreach tool, not just for dairy farmers, but for people that don't know and haven't been on dairy farms to have the opportunity to come and learn a little bit more about what that's all about and the mission of the land grant institution, the founding college at Michigan State University, and the research arm, AgBioResearch, and the outreach arm, extension, and why the work we do is not just still relevant, but so important. So the future is bright. I know many people were instrumental in helping advocate for support for that facility within the dairy industry, including yourself and others. And we couldn't be more grateful and enthusiastic in terms of what the future will hold. And it's gonna pay off in a big way. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I know you sold your cows, but there's not many people that I would respect their opinion more than you about what are the needs of the future. So as you look at Dr. Persley's work, you look at the dairy industry in general, what are some of the areas you see where future research is going to be really important to support the industry, whether we're talking about reproduction research that Richard does or other areas? We'd love to get your perspective and insight about the future.
Well, I know Dr. Persley is doing a major focus on pregnancy loss. And that was always kind of a bugaboo with me because you'd think you had an animal pregnant and turns out she isn't. And you get too far down the roadway, you've lost an animal for milk production. She's going to be into her second full-time job as meat production. But I think that's important. Continuing to improve the genetics, which with an efficient breeding program is going to be much easier to do. Pointing out to the rest of the world how important this is also a dynamic issue that needs to be promoted.
Right.
When you talk about the industry, we've got a lot of consolidation going on. It's changed dramatically. And I think there's probably some issues in larger operations that are probably not getting the focus that they need.
Uh-huh.
So there's probably some issues there. Um, it changes so rapidly. People don't like to think about climate change, but climate does change just naturally.
Mhm.
I think there's issues on feed production for animals.
Mhm.
Um, there's not a lack of issues that need to be researched.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective. No shortage of challenges in the future, but the work that we do as the state's university, the land grant institution, the research we do to enhance the dairy industry and help address those problems again, now more important than ever. So research isn't something where the need goes away because the challenges that their dairy industry faces are always changing as well. And the landscape that have to navigate in is becoming more and more complicated, looking at markets and a whole host of issues. So now more important than ever is that support and investment in research and extension. You've provided a host of great examples. So, Ken, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I'm happy to give you the last word. Any parting thoughts or wisdom you want to share with our listening audience?
Well, I have enjoyed it also. And as we've noted, I'm no longer milking cows.
Uh,
But one of the reasons I really enjoy the dairy industry is my firm belief in the nutritional value of dairy products. And that has not changed. And I will continue
right,
to promote that fact. And I
right,
will continue to work
right.
to increase research dollars
Uh-huh.
because I think it's a great industry.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on, Ken. More important now than ever with the new food pyramid and dietary guidelines. And who doesn't love ice cream? So who can't get excited about the dairy industry? Everyone loves ice cream. I know I do. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. All right. Well, great conversation, my friend. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, George. Take care.